The agency called her on a Tuesday. She was on her bedroom floor, painting her toenails, the bottle balanced on a coaster she had stolen from a hotel lobby because she had nothing else flat enough to set it on. The color was called rosewater. She had bought it because the name had sounded, to her, like the name of a thing a richer girl would own. The phone buzzed, and she almost let it go. The agency only called when they had something, and they only had something when nobody else would take it. But her rent was 9 days late. Her mother had said 2 weeks earlier, on a phone call that had ended badly, that she was not going to send any more money. Her mother had said this with the particular tenderness of a woman who had said it many times before and wanted, this time, to mean it. Her mother had said, "You have to learn how to be careful." Her mother had said, "Not every job is a job." She picked up a family in the hills, 1 baby, overnight rate, cash. She said yes before they finished the address. She was 19. She had never been past the gate of a house like this. She had grown up in apartments where the walls were so thin she knew her neighbors' arguments by heart, where the heat clanked like something kept in a basement, where the windows wept in winter, and the floor in every room sloped a little toward the door. She had thought, for most of her life, that this was just what living was, that houses were just larger versions of her childhood, louder, maybe, or quieter, but built of the same complaining wood. She took 2 buses and a long walk up a road with no sidewalk. The neighborhoods got cleaner the higher she went. The cars in the driveways stopped having dents. The trees stopped looking like they were trying. By the time she reached the address, the houses were so far apart she could not see one from the other, and the silence between them felt curated, the way silence in a museum feels curated, the way it has been paid for. She walked the last quarter mile alone in the dark, her phone in her hand for the flashlight, her bag over her shoulder, her good shoes already rubbing at her heels. The road did not have streetlights. The houses did not need them, apparently. There were lamps in the gardens of some of the properties she passed, half hidden in the hedges, throwing soft yellow circles onto bark and stone. And twice she heard the sound of a sprinkler hissing on in someone's lawn at an hour no lawn needed water. She kept walking. The address she was looking for had no number on the gate, only a small brass plate. And when she reached it, she stopped and read the plate and felt the hairs on the back of her neck lift in the way they sometimes did before a fever. When the gate opened on its own, she felt her chest go tight in a way she mistook for excitement. She had read about gates like that in the kind of magazines that left fingerprints on her hands. The driveway curved. She walked up it slowly, partly because of her shoes, and partly because she wanted to look. The house was set back into the hill the way some houses are set into hills, as if they had been there first, as if the hill had grown up around them out of politeness. Lights burned in 3 of the windows. The rest were dark. The wife met her at the door. She was younger than she'd expected, maybe 30, maybe 35, with the face of someone who had never had to hurry anywhere. Soft voice, soft hands, a robe that probably cost more than her rent. There was something wrong with her smile, but she could not have said what. It was the kind of wrong that looked, at first, like kindness. "You found us," the wife said. "I always worry about the road. He's already asleep. He sleeps through the night. You won't have to do much." The husband was behind her, putting on a coat. He was older than the wife by a decade at least, his hair gone silver at the temples in a way that looked deliberate, like he had asked it to. He smiled at her the way men like that smile at girls like her. Polite, distant, already forgetting her face. "Help yourself to anything in the kitchen," the wife said. "Anything at all. The bedrooms upstairs are off limits, of course. I'm sure you understand. But the rest of the house is yours. We want you to feel at home. We want you to feel at home." She would think about that sentence later. The way the wife said it. The faint emphasis on home, as if it were an instruction. "6 in the morning," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she meant it to. 6 in the morning, the wife said. "Maybe a little before. We're early risers." The husband stepped past her into the night. He smelled like cedar and something else, something underneath that she could not place. The wife touched her arm, just a brush, just a thank you for coming touch, and her fingers were so cold the cold went straight through her sleeve. Then they were gone. She stood in the foyer for a long time, just listening. The house was quiet in a way her apartment had never been. No traffic, no neighbors, no hum from old appliances, just the soft tick of a clock somewhere deep in the building and the slow breathing of money. She locked the door behind her. She didn't know why. Then she unlocked it. Then she locked it again. Then she stopped touching it because she could feel herself starting to spiral. And she had been told by every adult who had ever been useful to her that spiraling was the thing that ruined girls like her. She checked on the baby first. His room was at the end of a hallway lined with framed pencil drawings of horses. She did not look at the drawings closely. She would think about that later too, how she had walked past them without looking, how she had been too nervous to be curious, how the house had given her so many chances. The baby was real, pink, warm, asleep on his back, the way the book said. He was wearing a small white onesie embroidered at the collar, with a letter she didn't recognize. Not English, not exactly, but something close enough to almost read. She watched him for almost a minute before she could believe a baby could be that still. His chest rose. His chest fell. His little hand was curled against his cheek, the way her own hand sometimes was when she woke up in the middle of the night. She felt, looking at him, a wave of something close to relief. There was a baby. There was a real baby. Whatever else this house was, it was a place where a baby slept. She closed the door softly and went back downstairs. Then she started to look around. She told herself she was just curious. That's what she told herself. The kitchen was bigger than her whole apartment. The fridge had 2 doors. The stovetop was the kind chefs had on television: 6 burners and a flame so blue it looked theatrical. There was a pantry with rows of glass jars, labeled in a handwriting so neat she thought at first they were printed. She opened one. Flour. She opened another. Sugar. She opened a third, and it was full of teeth. Small ones, baby teeth. She closed the jar very carefully and put it back exactly where it had been. She stood in the pantry with her hand on the shelf and waited for an explanation to arrive. None did. She told herself there was an explanation. Rich people were eccentric. She'd read about that. Maybe they collected them. Maybe it was a tradition. Maybe the wife had a sister with children, maybe a cousin. Maybe the baby in the crib was not their first, and the teeth in the jar belonged to children long since grown into their adult mouths. She could feel her own hands shaking, and she made them stop. She closed the pantry door. She turned off the kitchen light. She told herself she would just sit in the living room until 6. She would not look at anything else. She would scroll on her phone and eat one of the apples on the counter. Surely an apple was safe. Surely an apple was just an apple. And she would wait for morning the way she had waited for mornings her whole life. By being patient, by being small, by taking up as little of the dark as possible. She made it 11 minutes. She sat on the edge of a leather couch in a room she could only assume was the living room, though it was so large and so symmetrical it might have been any room a magazine had photographed and called by that name. She did not eat the apple. She held her phone in her hand and watched the battery percentage tick down by ones, and tried to scroll, and could not scroll, because every time her thumb moved, she heard the soft tick of the clock somewhere deep in the building, and the clock did not seem anymore to be ticking at the speed of a clock. It was ticking at the speed of someone counting. She told herself she was being stupid. She told herself the clock was just a clock. She told herself she had 11 minutes left of being a girl on a couch. And after that, she did not know what she would tell herself, because after that, she got up. It was the kind of house that wanted to be seen. That was what she would think later. The hallways were too long not to walk down. The doors were too closed not to open. Every room was lit just enough to suggest, from the hallway, that the next room over might be lit a little more. She kept looking. She didn't mean to. That's the part she'd think about later, in the part of her life she didn't get to have. She didn't mean to keep looking. But the house was so big and so quiet, and every door she opened felt like a door she was allowed to open because they'd said anything at all. The first room was a parlor. Old furniture, the kind with feet carved into the shape of animal feet, and a piano in the corner with the lid down. There was sheet music on the stand, but no notes, just empty staves with handwritten dates above them, dozens of them, going back further than she wanted to count. The most recent date was tomorrow's. She closed the piano, lid the rest of the way, gently, and left. The next room had no name she could give it. It was small, square, lined floor to ceiling with bookshelves. But the books on the shelves were not books. They were boxes, flat boxes the size of books, bound in cloth, each one with a label on the spine. The labels were initials, 2 letters each, in the same neat hand. There were so many of them, she thought, looking at the shelves, that whoever had done this work had loved doing it. Loved it the way some women loved gardening, the way some men loved fixing cars. She did not take a box down. She did not need to. She understood, the way she had understood the jar of teeth, that whatever was in those boxes was something that had once belonged to a girl who had stood in this house on a Tuesday and looked up at the shelves the same way she was looking now. She left that room very quickly. The next room was a kind of sewing room. A long table, a row of small drawers in a cabinet against the wall, a dress form in the corner draped in something pale. The pale thing was not fabric. She did not look at it long enough to know what it was. She did look long enough to see that whatever it was, it had been arranged, pinned, draped, made to fit a girl about her size. And the cabinet beside it had each of its little drawers labeled in the same neat handwriting as the jars in the pantry. And she did not read the labels, but she saw, on the topmost drawer, the word that she would later understand had been her own. She told herself she was tired. She told herself the lighting in this house was strange. She told herself a lot of things. The third room was the study. The study had a wall of photographs. Girls, maybe 20 of them. Each one in a small black frame, each one smiling, each one young. Each photograph was the same kind of photograph, slightly grainy, slightly off-center. The kind a girl would take of herself on her phone in her bathroom mirror, because she could not afford a real one. The girls were all different. Different hair, different skin, different eyes. The thing they had in common was the smile, which was the smile of someone trying to look employable. Under every photo, a small brass plate with a name and 2 dates. She read the dates. The first date on each plate was a Tuesday. She counted, because counting was something she could do, and every first date was a Tuesday going back, by her quick math, almost 40 years. The second date on each plate was about 2 weeks after the first. She made herself read the names. She did not recognize any of them. She did not expect to. They were the kind of names that did not get recognized. They were the names of girls who had taken 2 buses to get places. The names of girls whose mothers had told them, on phone calls that ended badly, that not every job was a job. She read them slowly, because reading them slowly felt like the only kindness she could pay. Marisol, Tanika, Joanna, a girl named Edith with a date from 1991. Edith, who had been 19 the same way she was 19. On a Tuesday, the same way today was a Tuesday. And who had smiled at her phone the same way she had smiled at hers. She thought, briefly, that someone should have told Edith. She thought, more briefly still, that someone had probably tried. She found her own photo near the end of the row, the one from her agency profile, the one she'd taken on her phone in her bathroom mirror because she couldn't afford a real one. She had used a filter on it because the bathroom light made her look gray, and she had wondered, when she uploaded it, whether the filter was cheating, whether they would be able to tell. The brass plate underneath had her name on it. It had today's date. The second date was empty, still being decided. She did not move. For a long moment, she simply did not move. The way an animal does not move when it has understood, finally, that the shape in the grass is not grass. She looked at her own face, the face she had been wearing all evening, the face she had presented to the wife at the door, and to the husband as he buttoned his coat, and to the baby in the crib who had been so still and so warm. It was strange, she thought, how a face you had carried your whole life could become, on a wall, in a frame, the face of a stranger. The girl in the photograph was smiling at the bathroom mirror in a way that suggested she had something to look forward to. The girl in the photograph did not yet know about the jar in the pantry. The girl in the photograph did not yet know about the empty staves on the piano, or the pale thing on the dress form, or the boxes on the shelves with their 2-letter labels. The girl in the photograph had not yet been read. There was an empty frame at the end of the row after hers, waiting. Then she heard the baby start to cry. She didn't move. She couldn't. She stood in front of her own photograph and listened to the baby cry, and the cry didn't sound like a baby anymore. It sounded like something that had learned what a baby sounds like, something practicing. The pitch was right. The rhythm was right. But underneath it, almost too quiet to be sure of, there was a second sound, older, drier. The sound of something humming along to a song it had heard a long time ago and was almost remembering correctly. Behind her, in the hallway, a door she hadn't opened, yet opened on its own. She did not turn around. The wife's voice came from inside it, soft and close, like she'd been standing just behind the door the whole time. "Sweetheart," the wife said, "you can come in now. We've been waiting so long for you to find us." The wife had not left. She understood that then. The husband had left, or the thing that wore the husband's coat had left, but the wife had been in the house the whole time. Behind every door she had not opened, in every room she had not entered, the wife had been the silence. The wife had been the slow breathing of money. She thought about her mother. She thought about the bus ride home. She thought about how she had always believed that people who lived in houses like this were better than her, kinder than her, cleaner than her. How she had read the magazines on the bus and looked at the kitchens and thought, when I am older, when I am married, when I have done the thing I do not yet know how to do, I will live in a kitchen like that, and the jars in my pantry will be labeled in a handwriting so neat it looks printed, and I will be the kind of woman whose fingers are cold from holding a glass of something good. She thought about how badly she had wanted to belong to a place like this. The house had heard her wanting. The house had been listening for years. It had not chosen her on Tuesday. It had chosen her at 14, at 16. At every age she had stood at a bus stop and looked up at the hills. and let her wanting drift in the direction of these windows. The agency had only been the last hand. The first hand had been her own. She took one step toward the open door. She didn't decide to. Her foot just moved. The baby stopped crying. The hallway was longer than it had been. She was almost sure of it. The drawings of horses on the walls were watching her. She was almost sure of that, too. There was no question in her mind anymore about what the pale thing on the dress form had been. There was no question about the empty staves on the piano. There was no question about the embroidered letter on the baby's onesie, which had not been a letter, had not even been close, had only been a shape pretending. Somewhere upstairs, very faintly, she heard the soft sound of a brass plate being polished. The second date, she understood, was being decided right now by how long she took to walk down the hall. She thought for one bright second about running. The front door was behind her. The driveway was behind that. 2 buses and a long walk, and her apartment with the painted toenails drying on the floor, and the rent 9 days late, and her mother, who had told her when she took this job to be careful of houses she could not afford. The wife's fingers had been so cold. The cold had gone through her sleeve. The cold was still there on her arm, like a print. She thought about running, but the hallway was already moving her forward, or she was moving herself. She could not anymore tell the difference. Her body had been raised to walk through doors that opened for it. Her body had been raised to be polite. Her body had been raised by every magazine and every kitchen and every gate that had ever swung wide on its own, to step toward the soft voice, because the soft voice had been the voice of every door she had ever wanted to be on the other side of. She thought, the wife is going to put a hand on my face. The wife is going to call me sweetheart again. She thought, I have been called sweetheart by women who did not mean it and women who half meant it. And I have wanted my whole life to be called sweetheart by a woman who meant it. And I am about to find out what that costs. She thought Edith, Marisol, Tanika, Joanna. She thought their names, one by one, the way she thought she would have wanted someone to think hers, if anyone ever did. Sweetheart, the wife said again, from inside the room. Closer now. It's all right. You belong here. You always have. She took another step. The polishing upstairs was patient. It was the patience of something that had done this work many times before, and would do it many times again, and was in no particular hurry, because the date on the plate was always going to be the date on the plate. No matter what the girl in the hallway thought. No matter what the girl in the hallway did. No matter how long the girl in the hallway took to understand that she had stopped being a girl in a hallway and had become, instead, a name being engraved. She took another step. The room at the end of the hall was warm. She could feel the warmth now pushing softly against her face, the way an oven pushes warmth when you open it to check on something rising. It smelled like cedar. It smelled like the husband's coat. It smelled, faintly, of her own shampoo, as if the house had already learned her, as if it had been practicing her the way the baby's cry had been practicing a baby. She thought, I am almost there. She thought, I did this. I walked here. The gate was open, but I walked. She thought they said anything at all. The wife was waiting in the doorway now, her robe paler than it had been at the front door, her hands held out, her smile finally finished, finally arrived at whatever it had been trying to be all evening. Behind her, the room was full of soft light and other shapes, and a sound like many small mouths, very gently humming. She took the last step. The brass plate upstairs stopped being polished. It had been finished. The second date had arrived. The house, having listened so long, had at last been answered. And somewhere, on a bus, on a Tuesday, a girl was looking up at the hills and beginning, without knowing it,